pandemics. The pandemics is a disease that can affect a lot of countries in the world. Actually, we are in a pandemic caused the coronavirus. This sickness is affect all the entire world. But what other pandemics are affect the world? Here are 10. A new virus of influenza was born in China in 1968. This is called the Hong Kong flu. This virus affects countries like China and the United States. The numbers of effects caused this pandemic are a little bit more. At 1 million of people around the world has died.
The cholera is a pandemic that still exists to this day. It is an infection intestinal disease that causes disorientation and a cold diarrhea, and if it is not treated in a time, the person dies. Cholera caused 3 great pandemics throughout its history. In the 19th century, its victims were around 3 million people. This pandemic exists in developing countries where drinking water is scarce. In 1854, it was discovered that cholera was caused by contaminated water where they were housed bacteria that were contaminated with this disease.
The measles virus is probably the most infectious virus ever known. It's caused by the paramyxovirus that is transmitted by contact, direct or airway. This virus is super contagious and can manifest 2 hours after contagion with the infected person, and through history, it was the cause of death of more than 200 million people. The vaccine was introduced by first time in 1963, and since then its utilization has progressively increased worldwide in the countries developed where this disease is practically eradicated. For almost more than 2 decades, measles has reappeared in 2019 with more than 30,000 cases. This has been attributed to people who cannot vaccinate their children despite the recommendations of health agencies, and most people that does not support the vaccination of this disease. Put your health and of everyone around him.
The next one is during 1855 and 1956, and it's called the bubonic plague, better known as the third pandemic. This could be the most devastating pandemic in all the world because it traveled over the 5 continents, infecting everyone of the already known Black Death. The numbers of deaths in this pandemic are incredible. Over 12 million of people in all the world.
The disease of AIDS has killed more than 25 million people, and this virus is an important part of our history. Mother being great and sad protagonist of pop culture, an example of famous with this disease were the great Freddie Mercury and Charlie Sheen, or Magic Johnson. Is a disease caused by a retrovirus that causes the affectations of our cells of the defense weakening our system immune. Therefore, destruction of human defense makes the person cannot defend himself against common and uncommon diseases, having lethal consequences. In curious fact, it is not the virus itself what kills, but the disease that causes not having defenses. The virus transmits through direct contact with mucous membranes or blood, and also transmits through the pregnancy of an infected mother to her baby. Today, there are investigations active and hard work is being done against this virus existing. Treatments that greatly improve important the quality of life of their HIV patients still have no cure, but today the treatments allows that HIV positive people have a life expectancy equal to unified people. There are vaccines administered in patients who have been in direct contact with people infected that drastically reduce the probability of contagion. Ideally there is to administer in 1 or 2 hours after contact, but never after first 72 hours.
HIV/AIDS is the cause of its maximum development of the AIDS. This is caused by the death of more than 25 million people. And this virus is an important part of our modern history, being a great and sad protagonist of pop culture how Freddie Mercury and Charlie Sheen is a disease causes by retrovirus that causes the involvement of our cells, weakening our immune system, therefore the destruction of bad diseases that cause no defenses. The virus is transmitted in direct contact with mucous membranes or blood, and is also transmitted through the pregnancy of an infected mother to her baby. Today, there is active research and hard work against this virus. There are treatments that greatly improve the quality of life of their patients. HIV still has no cure, but today treatment allows seropositive people to have an equal life infected people. There are vaccines to be supplied in patients who have been in direct contact with infected people who drastically reduce this probability of contagion. It really has to be administered 1-2 hours after contact, but never after the first 74 hours.
The Black Death is our next pandemic. It was the last one caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis. In this case, the main route of transmission was the bite of fleas that live in rodents, mainly rats. It's a rare disease today, but has a great historical importance for being responsible for killing approximately 1/3 of the population of Europe in the Middle Age. It's estimated that around 75 million people died, at least 25 million in Europe. Today, it is a disease that can only be found in rural areas and less developed small populations. The great loss of population brought economic change since it lowered the cultivated area in Europe, which in turn decreased agricultural production. However, this made the sudden labor storage provide a great incentive for innovation that helped bring the end of the Middle Age.
Spanish flu. It was caused by an outbreak of virus A influenza, which killed between 50 to 100 million people worldwide. Between 1918 and 1919, many of its victims were adults, young and healthy, unlike other influenza epidemics that affect children, elderly, or debilitated people. It was the worst of the three influenza epidemics of the 20th century, and it was especially deadly because it was at the end of the First World War, and during the first post-war year, therefore the states were not prepared to be faced with the pandemic, health and nutritional deficiencies in addition to the impossibility of isolating infected people in a hospital that were full of warfare further facilitate contagion. Citizens found themselves unprotected against the virus, and in a few months the disaster was uncontrollable. This pandemic exceeded the number of victims of the Black Death and multiplied the number of those who died of the war several times. 2.5% of the world population died, and the 20% of us were infected deposited the name. Its origin was not Spanish. The disease was observed for the first time in the United States, and they called it Spanish flu because the pandemic received greater attention in the Spanish press and the rest of the world. Since in Spain there was no war, and therefore its media were not censored.
The next is measles. The measles virus is probably the most infectious virus that has been known. It's produced by the paramyxovirus. It's transmitted by direct contact or by respiratory route. It's an extremely contagious virus and can manifest itself within 2 hours of infection. Throughout history, it was guilty of the death of more than 200 million people. The vaccine was first introduced in 1963, and since then its use has progressively increased worldwide. In developed countries where this disease has been practically eradicated for more than 2 decades, measles had appeared in 2019 with more than 13,000 cases. This has been attributed to people who have not vaccinated their children, despite the recommendation of health agencies and the OMS.
Smallpox is a disease that spreads easily through saliva and body fluids. There is no specific treatment for this disease, but disease symptoms can be alleviated with fluids and medicines so that affected person does not have such a bad time. Mortality is 60% and in compared to women it increases by to 70%. But fortunately it is a disease that has been eradicated. It last caused by 1977, even though sometime later the World Health Organization recommended to the population stop getting vaccinated against smallpox. In laboratory, small samples of the virus are still kept, fearing that it will be used in chemical attacks or in some biological warfare.